I am.
Hopefully everyone is able to see the slides okay. Are they coming through for everybody? I'll take that as a
Yeah,
yes.
I can.
Sorry, and now that I'm sharing screen, I only have a small window of you all. So if anything is needed from me, yell at me because I may not see it on the display. Are we ready to kick off, Linda?
I think so. There's a lot of people still putting their name in, but I think we're
Okay,
good.
I let me know when you're ready for the next slide and we
I
can.
think we can go. Okay, so welcome to part three of LAC Professional Development. We're going to discuss LAC tools and ballot issues. The agenda is we'll talk about LAC lobbyist activities and tools to support your work, how we do action alerts, league relationships, and ballot issues. So the second regular session of the 75th General Assembly convenes on this coming Wednesday at January 14th. And I think you can attend in person and stream it, right? You can
Right.
stream it. Yep.
Yes, if you want to be there in person, you can take a seat in the gallery or you can access it through the video.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so here is the House leadership. Speaker McCluskey is still the speaker, and Monica Duran is majority leader. Was Representative Basenecker, was he pro tem last year?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. And the Senate leadership is still President Coleman and Majority Leader Rodriguez. Okay. And the Joint Budget Committee is Sirota is the chair. Senator Bridges, Senator Amabile, Rep. Kyle Brown, Senator Kirkmeyer, and Representative Taggart. Okay, so please plan to participate in the LAC meetings um, before okay, so the meetings are every other Friday, beginning on the 16th, and we'll go through, and they're from 9 to 11, and we'll meet um, every other week through probably the middle of May, usually, I think is how it'll end up. So before the LAC meetings, each issue group should pick its two current bills that you want to present for a vote at the LAC meeting and prepare a summary and send that to Andrea so we'll all be prepared for the meeting in advance. And if you have more than two bills that you want an LAC vote, um, that's fine, but you can only present two at an LAC meeting. So any bills over the two bill cap will need to be done by email. And please try to attend the meetings and participate in the email votes because like with everything else, that's your voice. Your vote is your voice. Okay, so you should prepare to monitor legislation and track bills. You identify key legislation. It has to, anything that we take a stance, we need to have an LWVCO or US position. So you prepare by looking at those positions in your issue area. Prepare your bill summaries for your discussion in your issue group and at LAC. And the issue area group will come to a consensus on the stance they want to recommend for the LAC to vote. Calendar alerts for the bills are emailed through Capital Commons. It used to be Capital Watch, and they're set up by Andrea. The you can follow your bills on the General Assembly website. Just go to the search for your bill and it'll give you all the current information about the bill. Okay. If you find out through hearings or anything, you know that a bill is going to be referred to the ballot, notify Andrea. Um, you'll write up a ballot measure summary, which is there's templates for these, the bill summaries and the ballot measure summaries. There's templates in our toolkit. And make sure to send, it's the same process as for a bill. Your issue area group will study the ballot measure and recommend a stance after you discuss it and come to consensus in your issue area group, and then LAC will vote on that ballot measure.
Linda, Evie has a hand raised.
Okay, sorry, Edie.
Oh, that's okay. So when you say the top two bills, bills are introduced throughout the session, especially, so is it two bills per LAC meeting?
Yes, I'm sorry, I
thank
wasn't
God.
clear on that. Yes,
Okay.
no, it's not. You only get two bills the whole time. No, you get
Okay,
two
good.
each meeting. You get two bills you can present and ask for a vote, and then if there's other bills that are urgent or you just want to get ahead of the game in that 2 weeks between LAC meetings, you can ask that we do that by email vote. Okay. Okay, I think this is somebody else, right?
This is me. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda. I know we do have some new members on, so I just want to take a minute for those that don't know me. I'm Andrea Wilkins. I'm the legislative liaison with the LWVCO staff. I think there's been various combinations of people that have been kind of talking to and onboarding the new members. So just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on who I am. Please feel free to reach out if there are questions or anything that I can do to assist. One thing that I might just kind of piggyback on what Linda was saying about the email votes. It can be helpful to give some consideration to, like, if you have four bills that you'd really like to you need to get a vote on, you need to present to LAC and get a vote on, but within the meetings we place a high priority on the meetings being limited to 2 hours. We know you all are very busy, and we know it's important to our membership that we honor that time commitment to keep to 2 hours, which is why we do utilize email voting, both for bills that are really urgent and we can't wait until the next meeting, and for kind of those overflow bills where we really can't spend more than two bills per team. But in kind of making determinations, you may give some consideration to whether a bill really needs a lot of discussion. If it's something that's a little more straightforward, very clearly aligns with our position, maybe, is not real controversial, that's something that can be really appropriate for an email vote, as opposed to, utilizing the time to answer questions or have some deliberation in the meeting. So just a little bit of a tip as the teams are thinking through, which bills you want to really prioritize for discussion versus the ones that maybe can easily be handled by an email vote. Linda also mentioned, searching for bills, so you get a handle on, what's coming out as far as the bills in your issue area. A great place to start with that. We use the General Assembly site and the Capital Commons system really kind of in in conjunction with each other. Capital Commons comes into play heavily once we've established a stance on a bill and we've got that entered into our system. You can also search in the system, but right off the bat, it can be really helpful and, very easy to rely on the General Assembly site to kind of do your basic bill searches and sort of monitoring as to the legislation that's been introduced in your issue area. And there's a few different ways that you can do that on the General Assembly site. For those that have been visiting it lately, you'll notice that the look of it is new. They've done some revamping and kind of remodeling of the site. I think the content and sort of the basic tabs and drop-down menus. I think the information has largely stayed the same, but they've really kind of attempted, I think, to streamline the site and maybe modernize it a bit. So hopefully there won't be any real challenges there as you go to navigate that. But if there are, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out and we can always help. But a couple of different ways that you can search. You'll see here with this red arrow, there's a search box at the top where if you know the number of a bill, you can pull that up specifically. You can filter by session. And you can also, basically look at all of the bills that have been introduced. This is something that is pretty possible at the beginning of the session. Once we get further on, you'll probably have to filter more because the number of bills just becomes too great. But particularly early on, it can be helpful just to look at the full list of bills so you get a sense of what's been introduced. And then you can access individual legislation by bill number or just clicking on the links for the relevant bills that you see in that full list. And then if you are interested in looking back to legislation from previous sessions, you'll see on the left-hand corner there that, you can click the relevant session and pull up legislation that way as well.
Andrea,
Yes.
Go ahead,
Kathy
Linda.
Mark is having a problem seeing the screen. Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
I can.
Andrea, also, Cheryl has a question about Capital Commons, and I think it's appropriate at this point to add that. She wants to know, how do you sign on and how do you access it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Capital Commons, as we've gone from the switch from Capital Watch to Capital Commons, it's the same system, same bill tracking system that we utilize, but there have been a lot of updates. So, there's the change in name, and there's been a lot of improvements made to the system that I think are really exciting. Linda, Kathy, and I are still in the process of kind of getting our arms around it. And we do plan to spend more time giving you all information about how you work with the system. Because we're still sorting through some of that ourselves, we're not in a great place today to be able to provide a lot of specific training on Capital Commons, but that will be forthcoming. We will keep you all updated on that. What's going to happen initially is that you're going to access your information in Capital Commons through what's referred to as workspaces. And the workspaces are the equivalent of what were the old Capital Watch issue area profiles. And with the new system, I will enter email invitations for you to access your workspace. So I've only done that for one group so far as kind of a test, but I'm going to start doing it for all of LAC and all of the issue areas. So look out for an email that invites you to that workspace. And then as you access it, you'll be able to go on and create a unique username and password that allows you to get into your issue area workspace. We're going to have more direct access to the system than we have in the past because some of the improvements that have been made to Capital Commons, I think, are making it so you all can go in and enter bills, have discussions, make changes within your workspaces without affecting the larger system. So we're really excited about some of the new functionality that we understand was created in some ways directly in response to how LWVCO uses the system. So I think it's going to be really great once we get a handle on it. But for now, if you could kind of bear with us as we continue to learn the system, I believe we're going to be spending some of our LAC meeting. I'll need to see as you all start sending me bill summaries and we get a sense of what our timing looks like. It may be that we have to schedule a separate session, but there's definitely more information to come on this. So if you can kind of just bear with us in the meantime as we continue to learn the system ourselves. And we've also got a couple of outstanding questions for Paula Noonan that we need to get cleared up so we can be ready to share correct information with all of you. But in the meantime, do start to look out for those workspace invitations. They'll start coming out within the next few days here. And Kathy, I see you have a hand up. Please jump in.
Yeah, so I figured out what I was doing wrong with my screen, so thanks. I attended, I don't know if anybody else did, to get to one of those webinars that they did on this new what's it called? Capital Commons. The interface, I mean, that webinar was fabulous. And I think there's just so much functionality in there that I hadn't been able to access before. And I was wondering in the webinar whether we were going to have these little workspaces set up for the individual groups. I'm really glad to hear that's going to be possible. So one of the things that I thought is going to save us a lot of time on is we spend a lot of time making a spreadsheet, to track all our bills. And we wouldn't have to do that. We could just export it from this system rather than, constantly trying to keep up with a spreadsheet. Oh, and I think I saw Kate at, I think, the webinar that I attended. But are those webinars recorded? So they must be recorded somewhere and available. I would recommend if we could find them, that would be terrific for people to view so they know, how to navigate the system and maybe, some of the functionality and the features that they could take advantage of. I thought it was fabulous. I'm really excited about it.
Thanks, Kathy. That is a great suggestion. I believe they are recorded. So that's something that I'll hunt that down, make that available to everybody. And we can add that to the useful links document that's in the toolkit. Then it'll be sort of a standing resource for you, assuming that the link doesn't expire. But I don't think that's the case, and I can check with Paula on that too. But I'm glad to hear that the training was really useful. I'm getting that similar feedback from others that have attended the initial training, and that was certainly our impression too, because we had an individual meeting with Paula to kind of run through the system, and I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to make the LAC role easier, kind of from a technical standpoint, because we do know that you spend a lot of time on the spreadsheets. That is something that you can do within the system. We know people's email inboxes get bogged down as the team is communicating. You can all continue to do that. It's obviously a team choice depending on what kind of communication works best for the team, but you can also there's a function in there where you can send notes within the system. So we just think that there's a lot of things that, are going to benefit our advocacy efforts, but also really be helpful to all of you in hopefully saving time and just making the role of an LAC member a little bit easier. Kathy, go ahead.
So I was just curious about the cost of this. And do we pay per LAC member for access, or how expensive is this for us?
We do pay for the subscription. I don't know what the cost is going to look like over the long run, but for right now, it's basically holding steady for what it's been for our subscription for Capital Watch. So we pay for one organization subscription, and then it's my understanding that there is not a limit on the number of workspace invitations that we can send out.
Great.
Um, so I actually think it's a really amazing thing that so many people can get into the system and use it in a collaborative way through just the one membership. Um,
Great.
so
Thank you.
The
yeah,
price did go up though.
the price did go up.
Yeah, by about 20%. And we do also pay for separate action alert software. So I am really
Oh,
hoping that the new and improved Capital Commons has action alert capabilities so we can drop that other
oh,
subscription.
interesting. Okay.
And we're hopeful that that is the case. We know that we can create action alerts through the system, but there's some tracking and some other things that we get from our separate action alert system that we're trying to determine if we get that kind of functionality through Capital Commons. So there's still some questions up in the air, and like I said, the learning curve is very much still underway. But hopefully we will be able to get to the bottom of all this, and we'll have more concrete answers for you all at the first meeting. And if it turns out that we do need to hold a separate training, we'll do that as well. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I put in the chat a question to you. Can you let us know which legislators are term limited after this year?
Yes, that is information. It's actually on the General Assembly site. If you search under the legislator tab, looking at the screen, I know we were talking about bills here, but you can see at the top, the third one in, there's the tab for legislators. You can click on that, and the drop down will take you to basically a full list that will give you information on their term and when they're termed out. Um, you
Okay,
may want to take a look at that, but if you have any trouble, I'm happy to send you a link too.
thanks.
All right. Well, that was a little bit of a detour, but very relevant to what we're discussing. I feel like I'm missing a slide here. Oh no, I just didn't realize I was already on this one. So the other key way that you can search for bills on the General Assembly site that is super useful, particularly as the session goes on and there gets to be an unmanageable number of bills in the full bill list, is that you can browse by subject. And this was always the case in the system. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with doing it this way. But the look, I think, is a little bit easier, is a little bit more intuitive, where you can just kind of see the areas. And then you can click on that. The way that the General Assembly categorizes bills doesn't align exactly with the way we do it, but I'm hoping that the crossover is pretty obvious and you'll be able to identify either the area or areas that you need to check to find legislation in your issue area. Our bill categories follow our position book. And so it's very internal, it's very specific to the league. General Assembly is a little bit different, but again, I think it's pretty intuitive, but let me know if you've got any trouble or there's any confusion about, how you can find bills that are relevant for you. Okay, turning now to kind of the team approach for LAC. I will kind of reiterate what I think everybody here knows well by now and probably is actively doing, is that the LAC tends to operate in issue area teams, I think at this point in time, in all cases. In the past, we've had some areas that have really only had one person, so it tends not to be a team approach in some cases. I think that we've had enough movement within the teams and the areas that people have indicated that they want to work on. And I think we've had enough new people coming in that every issue area that we're covering right now has got a team associated with it, even if it's a small team. So, communication amongst the team is really key. And as we get closer to that convening date, um, I would encourage everyone to look at the LAC member list. It's got all of the email contact information for members. And on the second tab of that spreadsheet, it's also got the issue area breakdowns, and you can see all the members that are associated with a particular issue area team. If you haven't done so already, I would encourage everybody to reach out to your team members so you all can start discussing how you want to conduct your issue area communications and meetings. I think some teams conduct their work and their collaboration as to what bills they're going to follow exclusively through email. If that works for you, that's great. I think the majority schedule separate Zoom meetings. It's really up to the team to decide what works for you. This is something that's taking place, outside of the LAC meetings, but those team meetings are really important because this is what's going to allow you to discuss as a group all the legislation that you think impacts our positions and which legislation that we should be following and that we need to establish a stance on. It'll help you identify those top 2 bills per meeting that you want to present to the LAC for discussion and vote. Then you'll decide if there are others, what's appropriate for an email vote. So those team communications are really important. So again, I really encourage everybody, if you haven't, kind of gotten a process in place for your team, to reach out, come together and figure out how you want to do those meetings and how often they take place, what venue you are, what format you want to use for conducting those communications. Again, it's all a team decision, but if anybody needs help or support in conducting those team meetings, please reach out. We're happy to provide support and a Zoom connection if that's needed. So just let us know there. But as far as the overall team collaboration, we know that there is a wealth of experience within the LAC. We have some really long-term members. We have a lot of you that have really extensive knowledge of the legislature and navigating the legislative system. And then we have newer members that are bringing fresh perspective and ideas to the table. So, it's just really a great opportunity to come together as a group of people that are interested in a common issue and really kind of, benefit from each other's perspective and hopefully more fun too than working on bills completely individually. We do require that the team reach a consensus on the bills that you want to recommend to LAC for deliberation and a stance. You have to be basically in agreement or have a consensus for coming forward with that stance. And then as a team, you'll choose, essentially who's going to kind of take the lead in presenting the information to LAC. And it's likely that person could also be the one to provide testimony if you all decide that that's, the type of advocacy and lobbying that's needed in this particular instance. But it doesn't have to be just one person. Again, these are kind of team decisions. The team approach also, allows for more coverage. We know schedules can be really challenging. And when bills come up for a hearing, if it's something that you want to testify, but one person's not available, hopefully someone else on the team is. If not, you can always look to me. I like to refer to myself sometimes as kind of the gap filler. So please reach out if, there's just not a person available to do the testimony, I'm always happy to help there. But kind of how you all manage your advocacy strategy and kind of assign roles is something that's you'll be collaborating on within your team. So hopefully that all makes sense. Sometimes I think it's a little bit easier once you kind of actually do it in real life as opposed to us talking about it. But again, if there's anything that we can support with, just let us know. The stances that you'll be considering for recommendation to LAC when it comes time for us to vote on a bill run the gamut here. We can strongly support, we can support, we can oppose or strongly oppose. Other bills that we think are worth some attention, but maybe we don't take an active stance on, and we kind of just want to keep them a little bit in the background and have a sense of how it's coming along. A monitor may be appropriate there, and that's something that the team can do. If you're choosing to monitor, that's not something that we need to do a formal LAC vote on. That's really for when we are going to take an active stance, either in support or opposition. In some cases, it may be that we see things that we think need to be changed, and we feel really strongly about that. In that case, the team may recommend an amend position. And if that is the case, then you all need to think through as a team what that amendment looks like, because we want to be able to alert the sponsor and provide specific recommendations as to what we think should be changed, what would bring us to potentially a support if the changes were in fact made. So it's not just, we don't really like this, we wish there were changes here. We want you to think through specifically what those changes should look like so we can clearly communicate that to the sponsor. Oftentimes, if we go on record with the Secretary of State as an amend position, we'll get outreach from, either the legislator themselves or their staff asking specifically what it is. So, we want to communicate that on the front end, but we also need to be prepared to communicate it as we maintain that stance, because sometimes people from the stakeholder community or the sponsor themselves will follow up for more information there. So that's something that needs to be discussed within the team, but it is an option for a formal stance that you all can recommend and that LAC may vote to adopt. Linda, please jump in.
Kathy Smith would like you to discuss an official monitoring stance.
Thank you, Kathy, for bringing that up. So official monitor, like I said, monitor is something that, if there's a bill in the background, we don't really think it's something that we're going to testify on, but we do want to, make sure that we've got eyes on it. Monitor is appropriate there. Your team can decide that. But in some cases, we want it to be publicly known that we are monitoring a bill. And that's the stance that you can record with the Secretary of State that will then be publicly available if people wanted to look up what stances we've taken on legislation. So if your team decides that you want to, what we've referred to in LAC as formally monitor a bill, that means you want me to record that monitor position with the Secretary of State. And really just the team needs, if the team has a consensus around that approach, just let me know that that's what you want to happen, and we can make that happen. I'll get that recorded so that it's publicly known that we're monitoring a bill. In other cases, it's more informal and the team's just kind of got eyes on it. Within our own bill lists, we'll record that monitor position, but if you don't feel like it's something that we necessarily need to be on the public record with, we don't have to support that. In a lot of cases, a monitor ultimately will turn into a recommendation from the team to either support or oppose. Sometimes it's more you're waiting for information. You may have posed questions to the sponsor that need to be answered before we can decide. So it can be kind of like a holding pen kind of thing. And it can also be a more formal stance. And again, it is up to the team to discuss this, reach a consensus, and then let me know where you stand on that monitor and if it's something you want publicly recorded. Evie, please jump in.
So when PTA takes a monitor position, it's usually because there are good and bad parts of the bill. We think it's important, but we can't figure out what position we should take because we support part of it and we oppose part of it. So we put it in the monitor category.
That's a great point, Evie. And again, this is all going to be pretty fact specific to the individual bill, and will be a team decision. How you come to consensus on what you think the appropriate stance is to recommend to LAC, or if it is, a monitor. There's definitely situations where we may not feel like amend is appropriate, but as Evie explained, there may be pieces of a bill that we like, pieces of it that we don't, or pieces that we think are, maybe a little bit in flux, and monitor seems to be the appropriate stance as we see, kind of how things develop and how the dust settles. So it's a little bit difficult for us to have really black and white rules as to how you all determine what stance you think is appropriate to recommend to LAC. So these are all things to kind of keep in mind as you analyze the legislation and have those discussions within your team as to what you think is appropriate. All right. Here are kind of a list of guiding principles and values that we just kind of want to keep in the back of our minds as we think about our interactions with both our issue area groups, within the LAC, within LWV generally. I think these guiding principles are something that I think is probably pretty familiar to everybody, either via our LAC meetings or possibly other groups that you participate in, because I think really what we're getting at is that we want to create a respectful, safe environment for open and honest communication where everyone feels heard and has the opportunity to contribute. We really encourage full participation by everyone. We know not everyone is going to agree. That is perfectly fine, and it's actually really good. It's why we like diversity within LAC. We know legislation plays out differently in different parts of Colorado, and having those different perspectives, whether it's based on region, personal lived experience, expertise that you've gotten through your career, whatever the case may be, those various perspectives all come together to really strengthen our advocacy and, the understanding that we can bring to legislatures and then hopefully communicate to the General Assembly. But it doesn't always result in agreement. Perfectly fine. It's just, we want to make sure that conversations are respectful and that we're always aiming to reach that consensus. I know consensus is a squishy term. Within LWV, we like to say that it's kind of the sense of the group. It doesn't mean a majority. It doesn't mean unanimous. But there is a sense that it's it feels right for the group, that there's enough agreement around an issue or a stance that we want to recommend that you can safely say that this is basically the perspective of the group, even if it's not unanimous. Because it's a squishy term, that can sometimes result in sort of tricky questions, or maybe lack of certainty as to are we there yet? Again, if you all need support, or if there are questions that Linda, Kathy, or I, or Beth can help with, please reach out. But really, we're just looking to create an environment where everybody feels like they can participate, and we bring all perspective to the table to really enrich our advocacy approach. As sort of an extension of that, if you're to a place where you're just really stuck and the group just cannot reach consensus on something, we just encourage you to, kind of work through, consider the pros and cons of each stance. Recognize that policy development is oftentimes a very incremental process. So it can be really helpful, even if we don't think a bill is perfect, or sometimes we think it may not go far enough. We want to ask ourselves whether we think that the particular piece of legislation, if we were to support it, is it bringing us closer to where we ultimately want to be? That can be helpful in kind of breaking through that deadlock if you haven't quite reached a consensus. If it turns out that you just can't get there, that's a point where it doesn't happen a lot, but it does sometimes happen, where we ask a team to, kind of submit summaries to Linda, Kathy, and I, illustrating both perspectives. If there's, we've got a situation where the team's kind of at polar opposites. Somebody wants to support, or there's a group that wants to support, there's a group that wants to oppose. We ask that you provide a write-up or a summary and submit to the three of us, so we can consider it more in terms of the overall political climate, the lobbying environment that we're working within, of course, how it impacts our positions, and how it impacts our priorities as an organization, to kind of serve as the tiebreaker if it comes to that. Again, it doesn't necessarily happen a lot, but it does sometimes happen. So know that that is a tool that, or a process we can rely on if we need to.
Andrea, can we stop here for a minute? I think there's some
Sure.
confusion about issue groups and teams. Can you talk a little bit about the issue group and the team are the same thing, but we have a question, what level do they operate? And Diane, I'm not sure I understand what the question is, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
I'm relatively new to the league, and some of these terms seem to be interchangeable. And I was just wondering, with all the formality, which is which. I would like to see some consistency as far as the use of terms for us newbies.
That's a great point, Diana. And there does tend to be a lot of league-specific terminology, sometimes legislative-specific terminology. So if there's terms that are unfamiliar, please do exactly what Diana did. Let us know, wait, this is not making sense. And we can hopefully better define that for you. The issue areas and teams, I think really kind of the term that we tend to use is the issue area team. And then I tend to shorten it, saying either your issue area or your team, when it's really the issue area team. And that's intended just to mean the group of people that are assigned by topic to work on a category of legislation, say education or healthcare or immigration. The other piece of terminology that's going to come into play is workspace. And that is the terminology that Capital Commons uses. You'll see it once you get into the system, because you'll all be accessing your workspace. And the workspace is the platform that the team uses to communicate with each other, to create your bill lists, to basically store your information that the issue area team is using to carry out your lobbying efforts. I mentioned earlier that I know this all feels kind of nebulous when we're talking about it in the abstract, Once you actually start conducting your team meetings and conversations, I think it'll all start to feel more clear for the new people. But let me know if you've got any questions. The teams, I think, in probably every case, have got a mix of more longstanding LAC members and then newer members. So those more longstanding members are a great resource too for kind of that league speak that comes into some of our LAC activities. So I hope that's clear. Let me know if I can explain further.
Yeah, and it's almost as if the experienced members in the issue group teams will sort of guide the newer members as the process goes on and as we get specific bills to evaluate. And if you do have any questions after that, you don't know how to do your testimony, or you're a little bit concerned about doing it the first time, reach out to Andrea, Linda, or myself, and we'll give you a hand. And if you are confused about who KAL is, that's me. My name is Kathy, Andrea, and Linda. And if you don't know who Linda and Kathy are, we're the co-directors of Action and Advocacy this year. So hopefully that's clearer.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out,
Louise.
Kathy. And that's a term that changes as our board chair, our Action and Advocacy board chairs change. In the past, you've heard us come up with different acronyms for the three of us, but CAL is the acronym for this year. So another important one to keep in mind. Oh wait, I don't think I actually talked about that slide. We've talked about voting in between meetings. I think this has kind of all been said. Voting in between meetings happens when we've got more than those 2 bills per issue team that need to be reviewed by LAC and establish a stance on. It also comes into play when there's a bill that's been introduced or maybe has been out there, but we haven't established a stance on it. And there's a hearing coming up that the team feels it's very important to submit testimony on or to provide that live testimony. And you need that position in advance of the hearing date. There's not another LAC meeting prior to that, so email vote becomes necessary. I will say that email voting is something that we do quite a bit, partially to keep the length of our meetings to 2 hours. We've got a lot of teams. As I think everybody knows, LWVCO's got a lot of positions, and our positions guide our lobbying efforts. So we just cover a lot of ground, fortunately. It allows us to have a lot of impact, but it also means that there's a lot of legislation to vote on. You may recall from previous trainings, we typically follow 100+ bills every session. And honestly, as LAC gets bigger, our capacity to follow more increases. Our capacity to, influence legislation increases. So email voting is something that's going to be a frequent piece of the LAC role. So, when you see that, I think it's still going to be an email from me. I don't think it's something that we'll do through capital comments. I don't think is going to factor into this piece. So when you see that email from me, I'll try and always indicate in the subject line that a vote is needed. And we will provide the information in a written form so you can review that. And then the spreadsheet where you can enter your vote, which I've got a slide on that. I think it's maybe the next one. This is basically, I think, just describing the process that I was sort of explaining. You'll access the bill summary in the spreadsheet by clicking on the title. It'll be a live link. that will allow you to read it, but it's also editable. We don't want you to edit the team's summary, but we make it that way so you can enter questions in the bottom of the document so we can sort of simulate that live discussion that would otherwise take place in a meeting, and that you can get answers to your questions via the issue area team. So again, this process I think will become a little more clear as you actually use it, but we want to explain it and have the slides available to you that sets out the process so you can refer back to them, because we know a lot of information is coming at you and it's hard to remember everything. This is a sample of the voting spreadsheet. Those of you that are not new, obviously, will be very familiar with this. Those of you that are, you can kind of see how, all the member names are in that first column, and then there's a drop-down menu where you can actually enter your vote on it. You'll see at within the bill title, there's that link there that allows you to access the written summary and enter questions or comments if you want to. And then you'll see in parentheses the recommended stance. That means the recommended stance of the issue area team, so you know where they're coming from. And then you review to determine if you're in agreement with that. You can enter, in this case, a support. If you don't agree, that's okay too. Enter that vote, whether it's, you think this is something we should be monitoring, you think this is something we actually should oppose, let us know. And again, the consensus or the sense of the group is what will determine whether or not we adopt that official stance. Once we do have that official stance determined, I'll enter at the top. You'll see it in bold there. The LWVCO stance, in this case, support was where we landed. This is our only one for 2026 so far. So it kind of gives you a sense of what that looks like when you receive that voting spreadsheet. The bill summary components, when you're preparing those summaries, either for the email vote or for presentation in the LAC meeting, there's some basic information that we want to see included in every summary. We have the sample summaries and a blank template that you can access in the toolkit. But essentially, it's kind of all the components that you would expect. Everything that you would need to know to make an informed decision on your vote. Obviously, the bill title and number and sponsors, the relevant LWVCO position, very important, as you, I think, at this point all know based on information shared in previous trainings. If we don't have an organizational position that governs the content of the bill, then we will not lobby on it. We won't do anything with it. So we've got to identify how the bill impacts an existing LWVCO position and whether you think it affects it in a positive or negative way, and that'll kind of dictate that support or oppose stance. So a little write-up as to why you think we should support it based on its impact on the LWVCO position. Brief summary that kind of just captures that. I think in all cases, it's always helpful to understand the fiscal impact via the fiscal note. They're not always available right when a bill is introduced, so you may have to check back. Don't be alarmed if you don't see it right away. And you can always just let the group know that fiscal note's not available yet. And sometimes we just have to make that decision without the fiscal note. The fiscal information is going to be extremely important this year because, as everybody knows, we're in yet another budget crisis. And again, we are hearing that basically anything that's got a substantial fiscal note is not going to go very far because the state is struggling to make sure the financial obligations for the existing programs and services are covered. So, just new things, funding for new things are just sadly not going to be very possible. And then you want to indicate the name of the LAC lead on the bill, the person within your team, or maybe people within your team that are likely going to present the summary, likely do the testimony if that comes into play, and kind of be the point person for asking questions. And then we do ask that you send me the summaries prior to the LAC meeting. In the past, we've kind of tried to encourage you getting them to me by, say, like 5 o'clock on Thursday before the Friday meeting. I know that that's not always possible, but the sooner you get them to me, the sooner I can kind of get everything organized. And if we've got additional business to discuss, particularly in the case of this first meeting where we may want to go over some Capital Commons information, it helps me determine how much time we have. And because we ask you to try and keep your bill summaries and discussion or presentation to the LAC to say like 2 to 3 minutes, kind of trying to mirror the amount of time that you would have to present your testimony, and also kind of keep things within, a parameter that will allow everybody to present their bills and us still to complete the meeting within 2 hours. We do ask that you present those within 2 to 3 minutes. That helps me decide, all right, can we fit this all in, or are we going to have to, resort to email votes on some things? So the sooner you can get those to me, the better. But I do understand that oftentimes bills drop late and it's not always possible to have a lot of notice on that. Linda, please jump in.
Okay, I just want to add a comment from the chat from Tony. I guess she's being shy. She doesn't want to speak, but when we say relevant LWVCO position, we can also fall back on LWVUS positions.
Very important point. Thank you for raising that, Tony. All right, let's move on. I think I mentioned already that we've got the sample bill summaries in the toolkit that you can reflect on. It doesn't have to, not all summaries look exactly the same. As long as you're hitting those components basically in the order that the template sets them out, I think it makes it easier for all of us to get in the habit of how we're processing the information that's coming to us, and considering the key things that we need to have in mind as we make that vote. So your summaries don't have to be identical. It doesn't have to exactly follow the samples that are in there, but we want it to hit on those points in a way that kind of follows that order that allows us all to sort of process in the same way. And then, again, we're aiming for that 2 to 3 minutes. So it gives you a little bit of practice to make your statements within the time that will be permitted if you're testifying, but it also allows us to keep the meetings equitable in terms of how much time each team has to present and then still finish by 11. Okay, so as we decide that we're going to follow a piece of legislation, we've established a stance, we want to keep an eye on it as it moves through the process. You can access the committee information through the General Assembly site to figure out when it's coming up for a hearing, and get those committee agendas. You're also going to be able to do this in Capital Commons, but we don't have a slide for that just yet. I do want to emphasize that we really, if we feel that a bill is important enough for us to take a stance on, we want to make sure that we're following it through the entire process. So from introduction to either its final passage and signature by the governor, or to the point where it's postponed indefinitely, which for our newer people is the term that is utilized to basically say it's not advancing, it's essentially killed. So make sure that as you're following all the way through, if you're going to do testimony, if the team has decided that's the approach we need, we want to make sure that we're doing it in both chambers, both on the Senate side and the House side, or vice versa. When it comes to time for the bill to be debated by the full chamber on floor proceedings and to come up for a vote on second and third reading, which is the process it goes through before it can be passed by one chamber or the other and then cross over into the other one. Um, those floor proceedings can be monitored either in person, you can go and sit in the gallery and watch them live, or you can monitor them remotely. And the slide has the live links there. Okay, I think that's all for me. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now.
Yeah, when we're talking about testimony, you should know that committee testimony can be provided in person or remotely. And you can sign up for the remote testimony through the remote testimony page, which we have a live link there. If you'd like to write your testimony but not testify in person or remotely, please recruit someone from your issue group to testify live. We have heard from legislators that many of them do not have time to read written testimony or emails, so we strongly recommend live testimony. And live testimony means in person or remotely. So don't think that you have to go down and testify live in person, but you may. And for those of you in the area, it's a really good idea. You should send a copy of your testimony to Andrea, noting whether it was given in person or remotely, or if you did just submit written testimony. And some of the testimony will be posted on the league website. But because if an issue group member testifies, they'll likely to be able to answer any questions the legislators might ask. That's why we encourage live testimony. Next slide. Testimony is given in 3-minute blocks, but the committee chair can limit the time blocks to 2 minutes, which they do frequently when there are a lot of people wanting to testify. So it's important to practice and time your testimony beforehand. And I've found it's useful to have both a 3-minute version and a 2-minute version, so you don't have to try to change your testimony on the fly. If you do have a relevant personal experience, your story can provide valuable information for the legislators. But it's important to practice it several times and time yourself, and remember that you might only have 2 minutes. It's important to remember that the bill sponsor may propose amendments that might change the stance that you recommend on a bill. Most of the time, the amendments are offered after you testify. So it's important to remember that if you can get advance notice of a major amendment that will likely change our stance, you can either hold off testifying or just testify on the league position without giving a stance. Or you might you might say that our stance may change depending on the circumstances or the amendments. If you plan to suggest an amendment, speak with the bill sponsor prior to the committee hearing. It's really important that we don't blindside the sponsor. So a lot of times you can find out about amendments by talking to the sponsors beforehand if you might think that you might wish to have an amendment. And there are examples of the testimonies in the LAC toolkit. Suppose you think that a bill should be amended. You would begin the discussion in your issue area team, and the team would come to a consensus on the need for the amendment. Then you would write the specific wording of the amendment that you are proposing collaboratively with your issue group. And the issue group will come to a consensus on the wording and then bring it to the entire LAC for a vote. Now, if you think that there's an amendment that you would like to see in a bill, it's important not to blindside the sponsor. So reach out to the sponsor beforehand to see if there's an openness to amending the bill. And you could do that soft ask before you even talk about it in your issue group. I did notice that we have a question about the toolkit. The toolkit is on the League of Women Voters of Colorado website. It's you sign in. It's important to sign in because otherwise you won't see the members tab. And then you reach the LAC toolkit from the members tab. I think it's the second selection under the members tab. And I think there was another question. As far as amendments with testimony, we're going to talk about that later. Okay. You do have an amendment. Notify Cal of the amendment. That's the three of us. After the LAC approves your amendment that you're proposing, contact the bill sponsor about the proposed amendment. And amendments can be best made during the stakeholder meetings. A stakeholders meeting is a group of interested parties that sometimes a sponsor of a bill will call together to get their take on a proposed bill. And many of our members have a lot of experience in their issue groups and are members of stakeholder meetings. So that's an important way that we can sometimes affect the bill. And then amendments can be made during the committee process, which we've talked about before. And I'd like to reiterate, please don't blindside the sponsors. If we're asking to amend a bill, it implies we'll support our amendment if we'll support the bill if our amendment's adopted and there are no other really outrageous amendments added to it. So it's important to work with the sponsors of the bill, especially if we want to amend the bill. Linda, you have a question?
Well, I just see in the chat, Maud made a comment about her testimony that sometimes she will revise it because she doesn't want to repeat what others have already said. And she wants to know if Andrea should receive the full originally written testimony or what was actually said. And I think it probably actually said, but
Yeah, I would say what's actually said too. Andrea, do you have a different take on that?
No, I don't think it's different really. The only thing I would add is sometimes with really lengthy hearings, where there's just been a ton of public testimony that starts to become pretty redundant. There's times where we'll really just streamline and say that, we want to, well, obviously we'll state our position, what we want to see happen, but basically you can say that, you agree with the points that have been made in support or opposition to the bill, whatever the case may be. And you don't need to go through it again. The committee will actually really appreciate that because there just comes a point where, some committee hearings can go on for hours and it's just not beneficial to be redundant. So we may want to just really streamline and say that we agree with points that have been made in support or opposition, depending on our stance. And you can leave it at that. It probably wouldn't make sense for us to post a written version of that. So, you want to have your testimony be coherent, obviously. So if you're really streamlining, we don't want to post that. You want somebody that's coming to the website, say we have a member, random member that is interested in the bill, looks at the testimony that we provided. We want it to be able to make sense to them. So just keep that in mind.
And then Evie has a question.
No, I have a comment. So, what I do for PTA is I share the originally planned testimony because people our committee members are not all going to be able to listen to the hearing. And so, I might not say the parts that are repetitive when I speak to the legislature, but I think it's important for all the points I had been planning to say to be in the written record so other members can see what our position is because they don't have the context of what other people had already said. But in addition, sometimes I have to add things at the last minute because legislators ask a question, I know the answer and other people are uncovering it. So I add that in, and I do put that in the version that we make available to other members.
I think that's a great point, Evie. And I think this is another example of how sometimes there just aren't really black and white rules, and it's a little bit fact specific depending on what your experience has been. Um, we do, I think, want to keep in mind that, when we're posting testimony on our website, um, it serves different purposes, but one of those purposes is that, and the reason that we started doing it in the first place is that, we got feedback from LWV members that were not members of LAC that they were curious about, some of the lobbying activity around issues that they were very interested in. And so it just gives our membership more information about, the legislative proceedings around a bill that they may care about, and more information about the work of LAC, and they can see how those lobbying efforts have taken shape via that testimony that we post. So you do want to make sure that as you have to change it based on circumstances, that we just keep in mind that they do have that context that Evie's mentioning. I think we want it to be an accurate reflection of the ultimate point that we're trying to make. So you may have to adjust it from the testimony that you went in there with. But we want to make sure that there is enough context that it makes sense to somebody that's accessing it who didn't listen to the hearing.
Evie, do you want to say the mechanics of how you get your planned testimony into the record if you only speak a summary version of it?
Okay, well, we do not make our testimony available to the general public. It is available to PTA members, generally only members of the Legislative Engagement Committee.
Okay.
And so it's on our OneDrive.
Okay.
And it's available to, PTA members, not all like 13,000, but it's available to the active members of the Legislative Engagement Committee and to the Board of Directors.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I thought you meant into the legislative record.
No.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
PTAs.
that's why I didn't understand how you did that. Okay. Thank
Right.
you.
And we can go back and see, search by bill and find our testimony that we have given. I think we have for at least the last decade, if not more, saved in our drive.
Yeah.
So people can, and we often, there are so many bills that are repetitious of previous bills, especially things we oppose that got killed and they keep bringing them back.
Uh-huh.
So we always look at what our previous testimony was on that topic.
Right.
So we have a consistent message.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Jeanette, you had a question?
Yes. I just wanted to reiterate what Andrea said. When testimony has been dragging on forever, you have handed in to the committee your testimony, and that should be the testimony that I think should go into our records to Andrea. And we can just say, as the previous speakers have said, we agree with X, Y, and Z or whatever, and move on, because the legislators truly appreciate you being succinct, because they're wearing out as everybody else. And, you know, if you really want to hear, then should a legislator, if you bring up a specific point that none of the other speakers of either the support or the oppose, whichever side we're on, have, sometimes you may get a question, and then that's not going to be in your statement. But if somebody wants to really hear it, they're going to have to go to the committee hearings and see. You know, you can say to Andrea, here was my testimony. I abbreviated it because of the length of the hearing. But the members can get a sense of what we were going to be telling a committee on a particular bill. And I think that's really critical.
Yes, thank you. Linda.
Okay, I just wanted to read another chat, and Edie kind of answered it, but Cheryl wants to know, can anyone or any organization testify without registering as a volunteer lobbyist? What are the advantages to registering as a volunteer lobbyist? And then Edie says PTA members are not registered lobbyists. We consider ourselves advocates and don't register with the Secretary of State. And to keep the line clear, we never ask legislators to vote a certain way. We simply represent our position. But for league, if you have to be registered as a volunteer lobbyist to testify in the name of the League of Women Voters.
Yeah, definitely. We want everybody who's representing the league to be registered as a volunteer lobbyist. I know there was some confusion on the link. If anybody has not been able to access the volunteer lobbyist registration form, please let me know, or Andrea or Linda. And it's important that we register before the session starts. Kathy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just to clarify something for me, registering as a lobbyist with the Secretary of State is different from registering as a volunteer lobbyist with the General Assembly, isn't legislative? Isn't that different?
It is different, Kathy. It's an important distinction because we don't want you all to have to go on like a hunt, and we want to be clear about what we're asking you to do when we say that we want you to register. The General Assembly site has information on volunteer lobbyists, and that is what we are asking all of you as LAC members to do. We are representing our positions. We're taking the opportunity to educate and share our perspective on legislation, but we are asking that the committee take action to vote in a specific way. So we do want all of LAC with the idea that you all have the ability to testify if that is the strategy that we decide that we're going to take on a particular bill. We want you to be registered in advance, so all members of LAC have that opportunity. The General Assembly site and our toolkit has the volunteer lobbyist registration form. Kathy mentioned that some people were having trouble with the link. I think it's the link that's on the website, then our website through the toolkit, that's causing the issue. I know sometimes because the links are really long, for some reason, it seems like when we share them, they don't always work for everyone. And I don't exactly know what that's about. I don't know if it's a browser issue or what it is. If nothing else, you can find the volunteer lobbyist form, registration form on the General Assembly site, but it is pretty buried and you kind of have to know where to look. I'm happy to walk you through that process, but probably easier if you are having trouble, I can just send you the link. And then you fill out the information, you return it to the General Assembly. The email and physical address is indicated there, and that will get you registered. As some of my role for LWBCO is to provide direct lobbying. And because I'm a paid lobbyist, I register with the Secretary of State and record our positions that way. So they're publicly available, and I'm making disclosures in terms of, the positions that we're lobbying for, and pay information. So, part of public transparency is that people can go to the Secretary of State site. You can also access this information through Capitol Commons once you're in the system, on who's being paid, what organizations are employing paid lobbyists to lobby on various bills. So it's a transparency issue, but the difference is paid versus volunteer. So that's kind of the key. And because all of you are citizen volunteer lobbyists, it's the volunteer lobbyist form that you utilize to register.
And the
Cheryl,
volunteer
please go
lobbyist
ahead.
form refers to guidelines for volunteer lobbyists, and those are on the LAC toolkit as well on the website. So if anybody's having trouble finding that, that's on our toolkit. Cheryl, you had a question?
Yeah, so ultimately, the advantage for us registering as volunteer lobbyists, or maybe I should say, as the advantage of Andrea posting our positions, where do we access this? And where does the public access our seeing all the positions of the different organizations?
So the official position that I'm recording with the Secretary of State, you can actually access that through the Department of State website. There's a little bit of digging that you have to do to get to that, but I can make sure that everybody understands how to get there if you want to reach out, and I can walk you through that process. You can also access the information through Capitol Commons. You'll all see once you get into the system that on the homepage, there's a section for lobbying or for lobbyists, and then you can click on that, and it's going to take you to basically all the same information that's on the Secretary of State website. It's just, it's nice that Capitol Commons has it because it's easily accessible as you're working within the system. And we do often, ultimately, it's just part of, promoting transparency and public access to information. But it's also handy to us in our advocacy work. We sometimes want to know where, other people have landed on a bill, particularly our partner organizations. It can be important when we're acting in coalition to understand who else, has taken a similar stance. Opposition information can be handy. It kind of gives you a sense of, what the pros and cons and the different perspectives on a bill are. So that information is accessible through Capitol Commons as well, which I know people do not have that yet, but you will as the session proceeds. And then you can always access it through the Secretary of State website too.
Thank you.
Okay, we want to go to the next slide. When you do testify, please begin by stating Mr. or Madam Chair and then their last name. Members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is so-and-so with the League of Women Voters of Colorado, and I'm here to support or oppose this bill because it's a formal process. And it's a formal environment. So we want to wear at least business casual, no t-shirts. And please be aware that legislators might be testifying at different committees, and they might come and go during the meetings. So don't be offended if that happens. We've already talked about be brief and avoid repeating prior testimony and try to focus on the points that have not been mentioned and are important to the league. And this is, I'll just reiterate, please don't repeat others' arguments. Some of these committee hearings are hours and hours long. They sometimes go far into the night. So if if you have a very long hearing and somebody else has made your point, then please amend your testimony, not amend, but please change your testimony so that you don't repeat what somebody else has said. Focus on the points that are important to the league. And if you need to be nimble, just say, we agree with so and so, and you could even specify we agree with so and so about this issue, and say a particular issue. So sometimes you have to sit there while you're waiting to testify and be crossing out different things in your testimony as you hear what other people say. So let's go to the next slide. Action alerts. We've talked a little bit about this so far. An action alert is where we ask our members to weigh in on a particular bill. And if we want to have an action alert, an
Kathy,
issue.
may I interrupt and to say something about the previous slide?
Okay.
So one of the things that's very important that I remember when I first started as an LAC member is that there may be questions after the testimony, and you can't speak until the chair says your name, and then you can speak. So that's part of the formal process, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
No, that's a really good point. I meant to mention that. And it can be awkward because when someone asks a question, your automatic response is to answer the question, but you have to wait until the committee chair says your name and it calls on you, and you can answer then. So it's something that is unique to testifying in the Colorado legislature, and that is a really good important point to mention. So thank you, Celeste. Action alerts have two parts. We send a cover message to our league members saying, this is an important bill, this is why it's an important bill, and we'd like you to contact your legislators. Now, it's important to make sure that you're directing the action alert message to the right legislators. So if a bill is going to be in a committee, we want to send an action alert to the committee members. If it's going to be on the floor, then we want to send it to the people on the members of the legislature of either the House or the Senate. And sometimes we'll want to send one to the governor. So you would prepare a cover message to the league members, and also you want to prepare the proposed message that you want the league members to send to the legislators. Now we have a sample in the toolkit, but as Andrea mentioned, we might be able to do this through Capital Commons this year. We'll give you more information on that when we find out whether we can use Capital Commons for action alerts or not. But right now we're sticking with our the same program that we've used in years past. And if you do have an action alert that you'd like to send out, the issue group needs to draft it and send it to the three of us. So thank you. Next slide. This is the legislative action report, and it is on the League of Women Voters of Colorado website. It's under Take Action, It's a separate cell that you can select. And this is the way your local league members can follow along to see what the legislative action committee is doing. You'll see on the left-hand side, there's a selection that says Master Bill Tracker, and they can go down to the various issue group areas and see which bills those issue groups are following. Those are all the bills that we are following during the year. This is a selection from Capital Watch. And like Andrea said, we're still in flux. We don't have the selection exactly how it'll look on Capitol Commons, but Capitol Commons does have a bill tracker, and this bill tracker will show all the bills that the League of Women Voters of Colorado is tracking during the session. This bill is a little different from the General Assembly website. This report is in bill order, and it gives the bill number, the title, the subject, our position is clearly set out, and you can see the status as it changes throughout the session. So there's a lot of information available on Capitol Commons this year. This is a page that you can see what it looked like last year, and all the information you get. You'll see the summary. This is after you've clicked on a specific bill on Capitol Commons. It gives you a lot of information. It gives you the summary. You have a link to the full text of the bill. It's important to make sure that you're looking at the most recent version of the text of the bill. So as we go along in the legislative session, sometimes a bill will be amended. And it's important that we know what these amendments are and keep in mind how this might affect the legal position. So we want to follow this all the way through, make sure that there is no amendments as it goes through, and really evaluate whether this changes our stance. Also, that you can find here on Capitol Commons the fiscal note. And as Andrea mentioned, fiscal notes are going to be incredibly important this year. The state has a huge budget deficit, and fiscal notes are going to really play a big part in whether a bill makes it through the legislature. You can also tell whether a bill has bipartisan sponsorship. If you go to the committee reports, it will list what kind of support a bill has, or what kind of vote a bill got in the committees. Okay, the next slide. Capitol Commons shows which organizations support or oppose or monitor a bill. And it might be helpful to see which legislators voted for or against the bill in the committee and on the floor. And you'll see that you can get a PDF of the full text of the bill, the fiscal notes, as we mentioned before, and then down further towards the bottom is the lobbyists. And those are organizations that have taken a stance on a bill, and then you can also see the votes. This is a page from the General Assembly website, and it has very similar information. It's another way that you can follow a bill. You can go to the bill, you can get the text, make sure that you get the most recent version of the bill. You can see the fiscal note, the committees it's assigned to, the votes, the amendments, bill history, the sponsors, and the session laws. So this is another way you can follow a bill through the legislature during the year. I know I keep saying this, but it's important to make sure you have the most recent version of the bill. It's important to read the amendments as it proceeds through the legislative process to determine if the league stance should be revised. And this is another point. Don't rely on the summary of the bill. You can see a summary of the bill when you click on the text. And it's really important to read the whole bill, because sometimes the bill will contain things that aren't in the summary. And sometimes the summary doesn't match what the bill is as you've gone on through the session. So it's important, make sure you have the recent version and read the whole text. And then it's also important, especially this year, to read the fiscal note when it comes out. Sometimes the bill summary can help, the fiscal note has a summary that can help you really understand what the legislation says, but it's important to verify that with the actual text of the bill. And we don't want to be surprised. And sometimes when a fiscal note comes out, it might require too much money, and the legislator might amend the bill so that they can reduce the fiscal note. And so it's important to watch for amendments. So keep that in mind, please. This is a page from our League of Women Voters of Colorado website, and it's called Where the League Stands. It's under Take Action. And this section of the website has links to the position statements that the league has come up with. Positions are the formal statement of what the league stands for. We have both Colorado positions and we have national positions. You can use either, and please be sure to construe them broadly. These have been developed over many, many years. And as we've seen this year, that sometimes things change in the national and state framework, and we have to adapt. So the positions are written to be flexible so that they will be interpreted to apply to a great many situations. The positions books, there's two of them. This year's is the 2025 4-25 position book, and or 2025-26 position book. Yeah, 2025-26 position book. It's important to specify what year position you're citing in your summary, because sometimes we go back and see what the position was during that year for a specific bill. The position books, both of them, have a table of contents which you can link on, and it'll take you to the section of the position book that applies. There are various positions on government, education, pretty much all of our issue groups. And then it has the formal language of the position and the way it's been applied over the years. And so it's really, it's the fundamental cornerstone of what we do and what position and what stances we take on bills. So if anybody has any trouble accessing the position books, please let us know. If you can't find a position that you think a certain bill is in alliance with league positions, but you can't find the right language, please come to us and we'll see if we can help you find a position to support your bill stance. I think this is Linda.
Yeah. Okay, so before I start this slide, I just want to go back and say something about testimony because there were a couple comments in the chat. Maud made a good point that in addition to waiting to be called on by the chair to speak if someone asks you a question, if you don't know the answer to the question, just say, I don't know. That's all you have to do. And then Tony said, if you waiting to be recognized is also a way to make the committee hearing recording clearer. It'll be clear who is speaking if you're listening to a recording. Although this year we are supposed to have live video streaming of some committee hearings. I think it depends on what room they will be in. And I don't know those rooms, but we'll be able to watch it. So, okay.
Linda, one thing I would just kind of say to piggyback on Tony's comment, it makes the audio or video more clear when you are waiting to be recognized by the chair to speak, but it also clarifies the public record too. So if you think about it in terms of like clarity for archival purposes, it just facilitates, public understanding and transparency of the proceedings, in addition to being part of the protocol.
And then Kathy Marr wants to know if the cameras will be any closer so we can see who's speaking. I don't know. They might be up in the corner, but at least we got the cameras. So, okay, so acting at the national level. If if your issue area group wants to take an action that is outside an action alert, you have to ask for permission from LWVUS, and you do that by filling out a form. The link is on this slide. It's the Federal Action Request Form. And so this is any action that pertains to federal legislation. And you fill out that form, and I think there's a second or third question on that form before you really get into the details of your action. They will ask you if you have informed your local league, which is LWVCO, of your intent to interact with LWVUS. So, an information report to the state and national league is recommended. So, but this form will give you, it asks all the questions you need to, and will tell you what information you need to provide. Okay. So if taking a stance on a ballot initiative, and remember ballot initiatives, there are two kinds of ballot initiatives. One is a referred initiative and one is what is it called?
Citizens Initiative.
Citizens Initiative, yes. And so the referred initiatives, a lot of times they're a result of resolutions that the legislators announce. So they're on the keep an eye under resolutions on the General Assembly website. Capitol Watch I don't know what Capitol Commons will do, but they didn't follow the resolutions prior to this year. So we take ballot initiatives on the referred, we take stances on referred initiatives and on citizen initiatives after the citizen initiatives have been approved to collect signatures. And it's just like when you do when you discuss a bill in your issue area group, you go through the same steps. It goes to your issue area group and you discuss it and decide if you're going to recommend a stance on that initiative. We have and there's a form we use. There's a template in the LAC toolkit, and you have to send your, just like with a bill summary, you send the ballot issue summary to Andrea for an LAC vote. Okay. So this is a sample of the ballot initiative summary. It's a lot like the bill summary. There's more detail. I would say the biggest difference is the fiscal summary. We ask that you provide a little summary of that. And on the bill summaries, we can suggest amendments. On the ballot initiative, some ballot measure summaries, we cannot suggest amending anything. So, and I think this is continued. You have to list the league positions and the rationale why our positions apply. So, but the templates are provided on our web in the LAC toolkit.
Linda, can we go back to national positions? I think there's some confusion about when we take sorry, hold on.
Okay, well, if I wasn't clear, you have to ask for permission to take action on any federal legislation. Like if you want to contact your federal legislators, you have to ask LWVUS first, because they may already be taking action and they don't want us to. That's the one time I wanted to contact legislators to get their support for not defunding public radio and NPR. And I sent a permission form into LWVUS, and they came back and said, please don't do that, because we signed on to a letter that with the other advocates asking legislators to not defund public broadcasting.
I think the confusion might be, and I'm not sure about this, there's a difference between taking a position on a national issue and using an LWVUS position. We can use LWVUS positions, which are our framework of what our principles are. Like if it says, we believe in transparency in the federal government, we can apply that to the state government action. But if we're taking a position on a bill in Congress, that would be a national issue that the National League would take action on. Does that clarify things?
So may I chime in? This is Tony, and I can't find my hand raiser thing. Let's use the example of the recently vetoed bill to provide clean water infrastructure for, I guess, mostly the San Luis Valley. It's on the Arkansas River anyhow. That's an issue that is important to Colorado. But it is something we would want to do with our national representatives. And so we would ask permission from the League of Women Voters of the US to go ahead and act as Colorado with using our positions and saying the League of Women Voters of Colorado is devastated by the fact that funding has been cut. So you're taking action at the federal level, but it is not something that the national level has done anything about. So we need to do something about that. Okay? Is that clear?
This is Janine, and I'm the one who posed this question because I'm wondering if the League of US is doing a call to action. Are they advising us as individuals to do a
No,
call? Or so if they've done a call for action to action, why would we need their permission?
Well,
you don't need
we
permission
don't.
for call to action.
No,
Okay,
we don't.
okay. That was
Maybe
my confusion.
okay, well, that was probably because I said it, so you were confused. Sorry.
Oh,
And
thank you so
I
much
just
for
wanted
clearing
to
this
add,
up.
we used this form when there were suggested flyovers over Rocky Mountain National Park with
Mhm.
helicopters. And this was a national park, so it was a national issue. And the Estes League was very active in trying to prevent this from happening. And so we had to ask permission from US to address this issue. And, you know, so they're national issues. We have positions nationally and in the state to block, you know, for our stance. And so we can then move in. Does it happen often? No. Under the present administration nationally, we get a lot of crises, but that's a separate issue. And you know, the recent Tony's giving an example of how we could use potential to go to national and contact our legislators in Colorado regarding the veto on the water bill that was made, which affects a lot of people, and it's been going on for 20 or 30 years. So.
Okay. So back to the ballot initiatives summaries. Okay. So do you have any questions? Did I thoroughly confuse everybody? Or do you have any questions? Maud?
Can I say something really quickly, Linda?
Yeah.
It's more of a comment than a question. And I'm just getting over that new flu, so bear with me. Trying not to use my voice very much. But I think it's really important, especially for new members of LAC, to know that there's always a helpful hand there. If you have questions about stuff, or if you need some support, extra support, understanding things, it's a lot to process. And and it's some of the language things seem more important than they are. I think it's just, you do the work, and some of the rest of it takes care of itself. But I know in my case, Kathy Wilson just really mentored me and helped me through, and I think that many of us are available to do that. So if it seems confusing, and it's really just reach out, make sure you connect with people on your team, and have at it.
Okay, Maud.
Also a comment. Yeah. On league speak, we try to use the word position for our longstanding positions, like we're in favor of transparency in government, and then stance for what we're taking on a particular ballot initiative or a bill. Like we oppose a bill that reduces that reduces the effect of open meeting law. And that would be a stance on an individual bill, whereas the position is for transparency. But you will hear old timers use position for both, just to confuse people, because we forget.
Okay, Leah.
Oh, thanks. And sorry, I'm not going to video today because I think I'm getting whatever somebody had earlier. And we don't want to scare the children and horses. I wanted to just throw this out there and see if there's any support for it, or if it's just a crazy idea I don't need to worry about. I was
talking to my group, which is the Reproductive Freedom Task Force, we don't have a lot coming up that we know of to testify on for my group, but there was some interest in going down to the Capitol and maybe having a little tour and watching while people testify. Doesn't necessarily have to be league people. And I just wanted to throw that out there that I would be happy to do that. Not that I'm an expert, I'm a newbie, but I have testified numerous times down there in the last couple of years because we've had some really hot stuff going on for my task force. I just wanted to throw that out there. If there's interest, I would be happy to do that. And maybe Andrea would want to participate, or some other of our more experienced folks might want to do that with me. So I'm just throwing it out as an option for folks.
Leah, I think that's a great idea. And I know it's not going to be possible for everybody because, LAC is a statewide group. And so some of you are not physically close to the Capitol. But I think, if members of the various issue teams want to, pair up or get a little group of you, I think that's a great issue area team activity. I go to the Capitol frequently, so if anyone wants to reach out and join me, or let me know that a group of you is coming, I'd be happy to join you. I think it's a great idea. And then, of course, as individuals, you're always welcome. It's the people's building, so you are always welcome to head down there and explore. There is also the option to sign up for a formal tour of the Capitol that's given by the staff at the General Assembly. A couple of years ago, we did it as a group at the end of the session, but that's always something that we could consider doing again. We could arrange for a private tour. And you can also sign up for tours through the General Assembly website as an individual too. So lots of different options there. I think it's a great idea, Leah. I definitely would encourage the issue area teams to give it some consideration. If you've got some bills that are coming up, sometimes you'll have a batch of them that come up within a single committee hearing. That would be a great day to do it if there's an opportunity, but I'm happy to support or facilitate that as well. Beth, please jump in.
Just letting everyone know that LWVCO's offices are at 16th and Broadway, catty corner from the Capitol. So if you're ever wanting space to decompress, prepare, whatever, before or after testimony or whenever, let me know, and we'll be sure someone is there to let you in and greet you.
Yeah.
Coffee's free, so is Wi-Fi.
Somebody asked where I'm from. I'm in the Denver League, and it's the Reproductive Freedom Task Force that I'm the chair of. And I don't know who asked that, but that's the answer. And the other thing I wanted to say is you can take tours of the Capitol building, but I'm thinking about doing this tour while people are actually down there doing committee meetings. So you can sit in a committee meeting, even if it's not something you're terribly interested in. It's terribly educational to see how those things work. Especially if you want to testify at some point and you're a little nervous about how it happens and what it looks like. Fortunately, when I started out, I was working with Planned Parenthood, so they were kind of ushering me around and teaching me the ropes. And so I get, that's what I would teach, is just work on is just the kind of the nuts and bolts of getting into that courthouse, getting hooked up with the people that need to know you're there and that kind of thing.
Kate, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do. I would like to remind people that we have the committees are available to listen to live or the recordings. We didn't have video, but they were exploring it over the interim. Does anybody, Andrea, do you know what the status is of video of the committee hearings yet? And then I have a follow-up question or comment.
They have approved the video streaming, so they're going
Yes.
to be doing that. But I don't know, I think it was limited to certain
Committees.
chambers, yeah. So, but yeah, beginning this session, we should be able to watch them.
Well, JBC will be interesting, Joint Budget Committee. That would definitely be a hot item to watch. And just to remind people, that feature of being able to look at those videos and watch or listen to and also watch, the live proceedings on the floors is really important. But I love that we have recordings, and I love that I can go back to legislative sessions, and I love that I can, really drill down on some of the topics and see where things are going. But that's basically where I was coming from first, is wanted to know if we were going to get video.
Well, and I'll cite that as an example of one of our very early 2026 successful lobbying efforts, because the league was part of the push to make that permanent. It was a pilot last year, and LWVCO, along with many other organizations that are really focused on transparency and public access, have been pushing for that to become permanent. So we're excited about that.
Cheryl.
Yes, what are the parking options or parking recommendations?
I can't answer that question.
It's tricky, I have to say. There are meters around the Capitol, although the closer you get to the Capitol, during session, you'll see a lot of them bagged. Don't park at a bagged meter, even if the space is open. As you get a little further out, there's the meters. I think you can get up to 2 hours on most of them around in the area, which in most cases is largely sufficient. I know everybody's attention or our memory goes to the hearings that lasted hours. That's not every hearing, thankfully, but you kind of get a sense of the hearings that probably will happen with. The more controversial your bill is, and the more public attention and news coverage that it's gotten, things like that tend to be much longer because there's just more public testimony. In those cases, you'll probably have to run out and feed your meter unless you choose to park it a lot. And if you think that you've got a really long hearing on your hands, parking it a lot is a better way to go. It tends to be kind of expensive, but then you can just pay it for the day and you don't have to worry about running out and plugging the meter again. There's lots across from the Capitol. If you can find a space there, there's the the Art Museum complex parking on 12th and Broadway, that you can do as an option. There's lots in the area. So a little more expensive on the front end, but if you think that you've got a long hearing on your hands, it's probably more convenient for you. And Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we can submit reimbursements for that.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a paid parking lot, excuse me, please, directly behind LWVCO's office building, that rarely fills all the way up. So that's a good option as well. It's at basically 16th and Cleveland. And again, feel free to submit receipts for reimbursement.
Thank you.
And also, you can just Google parking near Denver Capitol, and it'll take you to various websites that will give you maps of parking spaces or parking lots and what their prices are and that type of thing. I've used one that's about a block and a half from the Capitol, and I can actually make reservations there, so I know I'm going to get a spot. Now that means you pay for it, so you feel compelled to use it, but there's a lot of options down there. You just kind of have to do some research.
Okay, so remember the LAC meetings are every other Friday via Zoom during the legislative session. They'll start next Friday, January 16th. They're from 9 to 11. The legislative session begins Wednesday, January 14th, and then the bills should drop when the legislative session opens. So you can check your topics for bills that are introduced. And the LAC contacts are Cal, because I don't like LAC, so we changed it to Cal. And it's myself, Linda Hutchinson, Kathy Ebersberger, and Andrea Wilkins. Thank you. See you next Friday.
Thank you all. Feel free to reach out if there's questions in the meantime. And look out for those email invitations to your workspaces. They'll start coming out in the next several days.
Here we go, folks.
Here we go.
Beth, has the National League taken a position on ICE demonstrations?
Not that I've heard.
So we can't.
At least not recently. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sending an email to them now about the gerrymandering bill that Breonna Titone is going to introduce, and both gubernatorial major candidates have come out in favor, as has Jenna Griswold.
Yeah.
So this could just be really ugly for us, and I could see a few board members having trouble with our stance.
Yeah, I'm sort of having trouble with it too.
Yeah,
me too.
So I want to see if there's wiggle room. Like you got what's going on here. Because we're going to need solid guidance.
Yeah, I felt like this week has been the equivalent of the Reichstag fire. Yeah. I really feel like we can't wait for the 2026 election.
And Beth, I think to your point about, some of the board members, maybe ourselves, having a little bit of trouble with our stance, I feel like I am torn. And I would say this was kind of the mess that the California League got